The Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast is presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Download their top-rated app and use promo code RTRS when you sign up for the first time. And brought to you by Nature Pet Food, slow-cooked with super fusion. Get 20% off your first order with promo code 20RTRS at Amazon.com or Chewy.com. LL Pavorsky Jewelers, where Rights to Ricky Sanchez listeners go and get engaged. Kornblau and Kornblau, the official law firm of The Process. And Kinetic Skateboarding. Get 9.1% off your first order with promo code Dave Silver. On the show today, The Process worked. Once again, Sixers end the season as the top seed in the Eastern Conference, and we wasted retweet Armageddon on Markelle Fultz. The regular season is over, so we give out some awards for the year, and one Jake Fischer, formerly of Liberty Ballers, currently of his own book, will join us to talk about that book, Built to Lose. Before we get going, I would like to congratulate Ricky, Guys, and our friends Michael and David. A couple months ago, I mentioned they were going to run a marathon in honor of their son/brother Ryan and nephew/cousin Stephen to raise money for suicide prevention and awareness. They did that today up in, I think near where you were from, Washington Crossing? No.
Not me. I mean, it could have been that, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it was Washington Crossing, like 1-8 something. I knew it was going to be far when the zip code started with 1-8. Anyway, they ran they lined up a marathon, 26.2 miles, just father and son, and raised over $11,000 for suicide prevention and awareness. Their family was out there with drinks along the route, taking pictures, and I went out and ran like 4 miles with them. But they did the whole 26.2. Congratulations to them on their time as well, 4 hours and 20 minutes. Very good. Really, really sweet, awesome couple of guys. They left the GoFundMe link up to donate. It's a very great cause, very close to them. I think depression close to all of us. So the GoFundMe link is in the description for this podcast. Drop $5-10. So congratulations to Michael and David, who did something very, very good to help people. Without any further ado, Amos and the Chef.
We were right, y'all. We were right. Even when it went wrong, we were right. We was right, y'all. We were right. So say the name. Say the name. We were right, y'all. We were right. Even when it went wrong, we were right. We were right, y'all. We were right. So say the name. Say the name. Say the name.
Welcome to the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. I'm Spike Eskin, along with the king of relitigation. That is one, Mike Levin.
What a season. To commemorate the season, I have one beer, and I'll be drinking that one beer on this final podcast of the regular season.
What do you got? What do you got there? You're an IPA guy?
A little local LA Santa Monica Brew Works.
Okay.
Just nice little Pilsner.
There you go.
It was and it has been a great season. And you said in the intro that it's sad that we wasted Retweet Armageddon on Markelle Fultz, which I hear the logic in, but I do still think it was perfect. And we'll get to plenty of relitigation with Jake Fischer down later in this podcast, but I think the benefit of being absolute lunatics that all of us are on Sixers Twitter and the Sixers online community is that Retweet Armageddon wasn't one event. It is so much that it is a lifestyle. And it just happens as often as we want it to happen because people keep reacting to us like we're assholes. And then we continue to be assholes, like people in the mentions of Rick Bucher and Bomani Jones and everybody who's ever, Mike Greenberg, anybody who's ever had a bad process take. They come back out. So it doesn't have to be an organized thing so much as it is a constant, like, you should walk every day. You should drink water. Hygiene is important. And, like, you should continue doing Retweet Armageddon. It's not one event so much as it is, like, something baked into your life forever.
It is amazing how many of those folks really just insist on tweeting through it.
Yeah.
Like, I like Bomani Jones. I think he is talented. I've seen him speak at a sports radio conference. I thought he was really, really insightful.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He came on my late night WIP radio show once. Very good guy. But watching him tweet through it, when somebody found a tweet from him from last year, basically pointing and LOLing at all of the Sixers fans last year, saying, ha ha ha, it was a failure. It's like, and he just in his Bomani way, and Bomani's style is to tweet through just basically everything, but this one seemed particularly foolhardy to me.
Yeah,
you can't tweet through anything with
it's very hard to tweet through anything. I found myself in a tweet through it situation accidentally with the Jokic what people deemed a Jokic subtweet, which it wasn't. And I just sat there with my hands sort of under my thighs and just sort of let it happen. I think the answer is to let it die down and then maybe address it on a podcast. But tweeting through it is not. No. It doesn't do anything for anybody. You're gonna lose and look stupid.
Think about this. Have you ever, in the history of Twitter, seen one person convince another person of something that they didn't already believe? It's never happened.
It has happened. I think in when your back's against the wall situation, I think no. I think when you're in the cold light of day and tensions are not high, I think there's like, oh, that's an interesting point I hadn't thought about before. I find myself thinking that a lot on Twitter, but when it's a tweet through it situation, I do think you're just up against it. You're just getting a lot of like gravel in your back and in your hair and stuff because you're really trying to fight against the wall, but it's not.
Before we get to this year's Sixers, maybe reflect a little bit, hand out some awards. I would like to take a moment to just this started by, I did this thing for a local Philadelphia journalist after hours bar called the Pen and Pencil that is in danger of having to close because of COVID and the roof or whatever. And it was me and Kyle and Keith Pompey and Derek Bodner. And somebody said something about Brett Brown. I think it was the host. And Keith got a shot in there. And I sort of felt, I was reflecting on Brett, who, if was certainly time for him to go, we all agreed. But without him, the Sixers might not be where they are. He certainly kept the train on the tracks when things were going crazy. Did win 50 games in consecutive years, which no Sixer team had done since the early 80s or something. And I just felt thankful. And I hope that he is looking at this and smiling a little bit, And I thought about all of the people that were involved in the team in a good way. So not the Colangelos at all, but all the players that fought their way through it, the Nerlenses, the KJ McDanielses, the Chasen Randall.
All three of those guys who are, by the way, in my notes right now to talk about on this podcast. So it's good that they're not too far from our mind here.
No, and of course, Sam, who has graduated to being a total fucking weirdo, just a total lunatic, but I'm thankful that they all had the gumption to do what they did. Brett to keep at it, not quit at any point, even though Brian Colangelo wanted him to. Sam Hinkie having the gall to do what he did. All the players, the 100,000 players that were on the Sixers during this time. I just feel gratitude toward them for getting the team to this point.
Yeah, and we'll get to the relitigation when we talk to Jake. I don't feel at this point, maybe earlier in the season I did, but at this point I don't feel the need to defend Brett or feel like I need to talk him up or anything. I think Brett ended up doing the job that he was hired to do, which is babysit the kids. He got a little bit of a longer leash because of the insanity in the front office, and ultimately they let him go for a better coach. And I think that was kind of always the plan. And Doc's not perfect, obviously, but I think Brett's cashing those checks. Happy for the guys that he coached and the guys that he built a relationship with, and somewhere in Maine, just doing whatever Brett does, coaching random park teens that don't want to be coached.
His son is now 16 and a prospective point guard. So
I love that.
Yeah, so working with him, I would assume. So
yeah,
it was just a quick tribute to the fallen. So it was a great final game too. Tyrese Maxey showing out, us just watching, and then just a statement about Dwight Howard's career that go from MVP type player, definite Hall of Famer, to happy to be in mop-up duty game in the final game of the year.
Having a blast.
Yep, just really having a good time.
Cheering for Wendy's, all that stuff. It was a great, perfect game, and this was, for so long it was the Sixers not caring in the final moments of the season because they were either fighting to stay in the 7 or 8 seed and it didn't matter, or they were 18-70. And that didn't matter, or like fighting to get to the 3 seed or whatever, and fight out of the 4-5 or whatever it is. And now they're just like they're the 1 seed, and they closed it before the last game of the season, so they could rest everybody because they're going to be heavily involved over the next 2 months of playoff basketball. It's awesome, and I love the Tyrese Maxey game we got to see. It is an absolute delight that he fell to 21, and that Masai didn't want to trade Kyle Lowry for him and a decent amount of other stuff, because I think Maxey has improved in huge steps since the trade deadline. He finished with 30 points on 19 shots, 3 of 4 from 3, and 5 of 5 from the line. He's just good, man. The biggest improvement is on the jump shot. Teams are respecting it. He's shooting off the catch. He's pulling up as much as he wants and using that to set up the drive where he's so quick going with his right. His base on the jump shots is really improved. Like in Kentucky and then early in the season, it looked like he was just sort of kicking out and sort of like flying a little bit on those jumpers and needed so much strength. But now it seems like he's going up really, really sturdy on those jump shots, and it's really nice. And he still has that floater. I have no idea how he has such good touch on his like full speed floaters. It sort of just sits on the rim so nice. And he just anytime they got a switch on him, and they were like trying to blow up Maxey pick and rolls because he kept like just hurting them on it. When he's allowed to go right, he's pretty unstoppable. It's a little Roten-esque, except with the opposite hand. I would love to see him have some of that with the left. When he goes to the left, it seems like he generally pulls up for floaters more, kind of fading. He had that and one going that way. AU had a good point on Twitter that Maxey runs like he's trying to break the finish line ribbon with his chest, which I think was a great point. There's so much joy in his game. When he's decisive, he's so decisive and has like a glide to him, like a burst glide. He had that two-handed dunk that I loved when Cole Anthony tried to foul him at half court and they just didn't give it to him. He's just a really fun player to see, and I think he deserves playoff minutes absolutely, because he adds an element that this team doesn't have that you point out a lot as far as perimeter scoring and creation, and speed with the ball in his hands from anywhere on the court, and certainly going forward, I think like he's got a really good chance of just being the starting point guard on this team for a long time. And I want to thank Daryl for making the easy pick when just like he landed in his lap, and of course Mike Muscala, who will, once the coronavirus is over, get a banner raised to him in his honor at the next lottery party for hitting a huge shot for the Thunder and allowing us to keep the OKC pick, that was the Nerlens pick, right? So he wasn't traded for a fake first-round pick? Is that what it was, or am I mixing it up?
No. It was... No, I think it was the Markelle Fultz pick.
It was the Markelle
somehow.
Fultz, right. It was Jonathan Simmons. That's right. That's exactly what it was. He's just great, and it's I feel incredibly lucky that he's here, and it's the team is like, as much as he's not like the leader of the team, it seems like the team has sort of like bottled his joy, and like the whole the whole team plays with it, and it's not just him, but it seems like he like embodies the spirit of it.
Not to pick guys against each other, but would you have more confidence at this point? Because I saw people discussing this. Would you have more confidence in this point in if you had to pick one in the playoffs? Would you pick Maxey or Shake?
I think it depends on the situation. I think if you're trying to, if Simmons is on the court, I would probably say Shake, because I still trust Shake's jumper. Although I think Maxey's shot has been really, really good since the All-Star break. Shake, by the way, who had like a terrible start to the season from three, ended up shooting 35% from three. So not horrible, not great, but not as good as he should be, because he should be in the Hollis range. But after a bad start, he did bounce back. I think it's going to be matchup dependent. Like I think Maxey has really brought it on the defensive end too. He'll still make dumb fouls and stuff, and he's small, so nobody
He's
really
small.
Respects him like contesting on stuff. And Shake does have like a 6'10" wingspan, so he can get bother some guys. I'd still go Shake, but I think it's pretty close. And I think there are some situations where you'd go like, we just need a little guy flying around here, so let's put Tyrese in.
A very important number to everyone, Mike, is number 214. Would you like to guess what that number is?
I believe that is the amount of people that have gotten engaged through LL, and this is another ad that I have to come up with something for. So really start me off high.
Just think about it. Think about it. I think Jake is I don't think he's engaged, but I think he knows LL. Grew up near LL. Every Jake in New Jersey lives together. LL Pavorsky Jewelers is the original sponsor of the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast, and Mike is right. 214 folks have purchased engagement rings from LL Pavorsky, who also listen to this podcast. I was explaining to somebody about a week ago about the wedding that happened at the lottery party, and I brought up the photos, and I still, in retrospect, it seems really, really crazy. At the time, it seemed like a totally normal thing to do. In retrospect, the fact that two people got married at Xfinity Live during the lottery party is just really stunning. And I think I'm pretty sure they're still married. Don of the New York Process Trusters asked if they're still married. I think they are still married. Anyway, LL, you go into a jewelry store, you want a guy that's fucking going to give you the real deal, not going to pressure you, not going to force you to spend anything you don't want to spend. Oh, by the way, 214 was the third biggest Rights Ricky Sanchez ring ever. Third biggest. I'd love to know the cost of that.
Yeah, really how gaudy are we talking?
I have no idea. Maybe it's like the size of one of those ring pops, like 10 carats. Maybe we're talking. In any case, whatever you want to spend, LL's your guy. He takes care of all of our listeners and takes care of them good. And as I've said before, he is now a more svelte, more trim and fit LL Pavorsky, having lost nearly 30 pounds over the last several months. He looks very, very good. Not that people don't look good when they're big, but he looks extra good right now. 707 Walnut is where the store is, but everything is by appointment only. So send him an email, lee@llpavorsky.com. 215-627-2252 is the phone number. You can just tweet at him at LL Pavorsky. LL Pavorsky Jewelers.
It's the playoffs, so he's short in the rotation, which means Missy and Jake got benched. No more helping out at the store. The rotation has shortened.
What else do I have? Well, do you want to? Before we get to Jake, I wanted to do some end of season awards and talk about potential playoff opponents.
I have so much more about this game. Let me really quickly run through it.
Oh boy,
come on!
This podcast is going to be 4 hours long.
This is my kind of game. This is a summer league game. I didn't get summer league last year.
You know what?
This is upsetting.
I give you credit. We're not doing it until this point in the podcast. We started off with the right stuff, so go ahead. Okay. What else?
Isaiah Joe. Come on. Yeah. He's great. He's exactly who he was at Arkansas, which is flying around screens, being willing to take threes in volume. Has a lot of arc on his threes, so he can get it over guys. He's not too tall. He's like 6'5", so it's not like he can shoot over anybody. But because he shoots it high and gets some good lift on it, he can get it off. And he's got some ball skills. I think he's obviously skinny. We talk about that every time, but like he works defensively. He takes charges. He gets in the way in a good way, like positioning wise on screens. And I feel like he draws a lot of Dwight Howard type offensive fouls on the other team on screens. And I think when Korkmaz gets paid $12 million per year next year, Isaiah Joe can absolutely step in and improve from where he is now and take up those minutes on a cheap rookie second year contract.
Can we talk about B-Ball Paul getting blocked by the rim twice?
Yeah. I mean, B-Ball Paul also exactly who I thought he'd be. I think when they drafted him, I described him as like Rashawn with some Thad. And because there's just some weirdness. He's just a little bit off physically. His limbs don't always work together. But there's also like creation abilities and instinctual passing and good hands that he just sort of, and he runs the floor well and he runs the floor hard. He had that late game like hustle, steal, and save, very Matisse-esque. When he's not getting blocked by the rim, he can finish well, little hooks, little like two-handed dunks. He's just good. I think I still don't really trust the shot, even though he shot over 40% from three in the G League. But I believe in him having a role in the team next year for sure. And if he can keep improving the shot, I think that he certainly could be the long-term answer at the backup five with Joel. He's an absolute delight, and I love how much everybody else on the team loves him. And like, there's some guys that are weird. I feel like he's almost Korkmaz-esque in that like guys around the team, like veterans on the team, are just amused by his presence.
Yeah, they think he's hilarious. Yeah. So when he does something good, they're fucking bad. They're all about. They love it.
It's great.
But I compared him to Kurt Thomas tonight. I was like,
that's wrong.
What are you talking about?
That wasn't a good comp.
He's nothing like Kurt Thomas.
No.
All right, who else?
Rajon Tucker. Come on.
Oh, wow. Come on. I've loved him since the first time I saw him. He's a process sixer.
He's a very, very much a process sixer. He jumped onto a lady in the first row, which is great, which reminded me of Embiid jumping over Regina King during a game, I guess, last year. And the lady seemed to be happy about it. Her family was having a good time. And Rajon seemed to apologize, which I thought was nice. He had that huge, like on the next possession, I think, had a huge one-handed alley-oop from Shake. I loved. He's really like a slightly smaller KJ McDaniels with some functional handles. Like, he does have ball handling ability. Not exquisite, but like he can get places with his athleticism, which I think there's something to unpack there if you can like clean up some of the rowdiness in his game. Not all the rowdiness, just some of the rowdiness. He really does fall asleep off ball and defense all the time, but he can get up and he's physical. And if you can, I mean, Doc has put him in for a couple one-on-one defense stop minutes in various times, which I like. I like giving him a little taste here and there, but I'm not super confident that he's an NBA player long term. But the athleticism is there, and there's some ball handling, and he's not a total non-zero as a shooter. So it's a very exciting final game for me. I'm happy that Anthony Tolliver got 3 threes in. Good for him.
Do we need to do Anthony Tolliver?
We need to. I thought Mike Scott had a couple nice games. That after I said there's nothing he's good at, and George Hill just like such a stabilizing normal type person, just absolutely doing all the normal stuff. It's so weird after years of the Sixers acquiring guys and them forgetting how to do any host of skills, even the skills that they're known for. George Hill coming and being exactly George Hill. His George Hillness is like impenetrable to any Sixers disease he could have acquired. So I'm very happy about that.
He is a little hesitant to shoot.
Sure.
Little hesitant. A little more hesitant. Maybe it's the thumb. Maybe that's what it is. But he seems a little more hesitant to shoot, to my eye.
And to me, that's like there's a narrow line to walk, right? Like, I think about it with Seth. I wish Seth shot more because he's one of the best shooters of all time. But he's one of the best shooters of all time because he
doesn't shoot more.
He doesn't take rushed, bad, overly contested shots. And so it's a mix. It's like, if you can get a better shot, then I'm fine passing it up for that. But too often when the Sixers are stuck in the mud, it is like Tobias passing up a pretty open three for like a contested, turnaround 19-footer or something like that. And so if you can get a better look out of it, if you can attack the basket and get like a layup or anything, then it's fine. But it's when it's the like just take the best shot under 10 seconds. If you get a decent look, like I need them to take that shot, and too often they don't. But I was happy. Georgia looked good tonight, and just always making the solid pass and the right read and everything like that. It's good. And that's all I have for this game. But I did want to shout out Nerlens, because did you watch that Knicks Celtics game? Your Knicks?
I didn't. I was driving around North Jersey looking for a house, so I did not see it. I didn't.
So Celtics didn't play anybody really.
Yeah.
But Tremont Waters and Jabari Parker brought them back into the game. Grant Williams played well. And then it got close late, and the Knicks started just throwing up a lot of clunky Knicks shots. And the Celtics had a bunch of drives to the rim that I think Nerlens had like 3 blocks on like 2 possessions that saved the game for them and allowed the Sixers to, and we'll talk about seeding now, but allowed the Sixers to avoid any of Miami in the first 2 rounds, which, not that I was as scared of them as you are, but I'd rather Milwaukee face Miami than us face Miami. So
yeah,
I appreciate Nerlens for that. Nerlens sleeper cell, Alec Burks sleeper cell. Very happy to have them.
I did see a lot of the same people today cheering for the Knicks that were like, well, I'm not scared of the Heat. And then it was like, please win, please win, please.
I think the Heat are a better team. So I'd rather, especially with Milwaukee, I'd rather like get in their heads and make that like a slugfest. And same with Brooklyn. If Washington ends up winning that game, and Beal and Westbrook just get in their head and stuff. And Washington's so interesting, man. They just have a lot of guys that put pressure on the rim. Friggin' Ish Smith putting pressure on the rim, just like making stuff happen.
Do you want to talk about playoff stuff now, or do you want to do end of season now and then playoffs and then get
playoffs.
to Jake?
Let's do playoffs.
Okay. So who is, according to my math, it seems like they could play anybody, but depending on who wins that first game, which team would you like to see the least?
I really want Washington to play Brooklyn in the 7-2.
Okay.
So I'm going to be rooting for Washington over Boston. And then I probably existentially and spiritually, if we're talking about Brett Brown, I want Boston in the first round, and I want to beat them 4-0, and I want to feel that, and I want them to feel us and get revenge for that. Obviously, they're not at their best, but the Sixers weren't at their best last season when they got swept. But I think just like emotionally, I need that on the road to a, like if they play Charlotte, because now if it's like Charlotte, Atlanta, and then Eastern Conference Finals, I think there's going to be a little bit. I'm not going to take anything for granted, and I'm not going to feel any. I'm not going to apologize for how the seeding turned out. I'm not going to apologize for the Phillies beating the Rays in 2008. Like, it's a World Series. Like, I'll take anything. The Sixers have been to the Eastern Conference Finals once in my life. I'll get there how we get there. But I would like to feel some redemption of beating Boston in the first round and putting them in the grave and allowing Brad's seat to get even hotter. And that would feel good for me. So I hope, as much as I'll probably end up rooting for the Hornets, because I think they're a fun team to root for, just watching those games, which I'm excited to watch on Tuesday night. But I think that's my perfect world. It is Washington, Brooklyn, and Sixers, Celtics.
Now, if Washington loses the first game and wins the second game, then we get Washington.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, and like, I'm sure I will eat these words, but playing like something like Charlotte and then Atlanta or the Knicks is a comical road to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, it is a relative cakewalk. They're the Sixers. We've seen them do crazier stuff. Like, it's not perfect. But yeah, and Atlanta's definitely a really good offensive team, and they have impressive players, and the Knicks are going to beat the shit out of them for 7 games or 5 games.
Hawks are frauds.
They're just young. I think that they're good. But they're young, and the Sixers should beat. Honestly, the Sixers should beat anybody. Whoever is there, they should beat.
Yes.
But as far as like who I want to feel, I would like it would be cool from like an old school Eastern Conference to just beat Boston and New York on the way to whoever's left standing in the Eastern Conference Final.
And I would say that the team not that I would be scared of them. I'm not scared of them, but the team that in the 1-8 matchup that I would be like, we could definitely lose the first game here is Washington.
Oh, interesting.
Like, because Washington, no, they're that coach stuff. They're just such a fucking. They seem like a mess right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if they like have it, but Washington coming off a win in the play-in, I just think right now is sort of feeling themselves a little bit. And Brad Beal has a lot to prove to Kent Bazemore, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I wouldn't be scared of anybody. You got to beat whoever's there, and the Sixers are going to be heavily favored no matter what, and should be. But if one of those teams in the 9-10, so Charlotte or Indiana, if they win 2 straight games to get into the 8 seed, then I think that's momentum and that's confidence, especially if it's a young team like Charlotte, because they don't know any better, and LaMelo is excellent and could just like control the tempo, control the game. Terry Rozier has no conscience. Devontae Graham has no conscience. Miles Bridges has no conscience. Like if they just get hot, like it could be less of a cakewalk than I want it to be, but it shouldn't be a problem. And if it is, then they deserve it to lose.
As we've talked about, we are considering suing the league and Dave Silver for what they did to Sam Hinkie in retrospect with the Sixers with the number 1 seed. And even though it isn't officially a personal injury, I think you could say that there has been pain and suffering. And if you're going to sue somebody because of personal injury, your guy is Adam Kornblau. Kornblau and Kornblau, the official law firm of the process. 40 years, more than 40 years, Kornblau & Kornblau has been the premier boutique personal injury law firm in the Delaware Valley, started by his parents. It's him and his mom now, has helped out tons of rookie listeners, not just with personal injury law cases, but anything, really. He's sort of our lawyer to go to, no matter what. I've had him look at contracts for me. It's not really what he does. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe I should have gone. Maybe I should have gone to somebody specifically. But in any case, he's helped out tons of Ricky listeners with tons of different issues. But personal injury is what they specialize in. Medical malpractice is their number 1. But anything, if you've been injured, if you're hurt at all, and you think you may have a case, car accidents, slip and fall, medical malpractice, injured at work. Any of those things. Kornblau and Kornblau and Kornblau and Kornblau and Kornblau. Give them a call or shoot them an email. It doesn't cost you anything. 215-576-7200. Ask for Adam. Kornblau, the second Ricky sponsor, I believe. The second ever Ricky sponsor. LL the first, Kornblau the second. Yep.
Yeah.
215-576-7200. Ask for Adam, or email kornblau@kornblau.com. Oh, that's right, because he was a counselor at your camp, right?
That's not why it was. We didn't figure that out until later.
Oh, right.
But
right. I don't know why I just connected those.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, kornblau@kornblau.com. Kornblau and Kornblau, KORNBLAU, the official law firm of the process. Before we get to Jake, the 2021 season awards brought to you by Kinetic Skateboarding. Summer's coming. You're going to need some shorts, some new sneakers. Come on. Maybe a skateboard if you're a skateboarder. KineticSkateboarding.com. KineticSkateboarding.com. Saw a bunch of sneakers I wanted this week on the Instagram. Their Instagram's dangerous to me. Promo code Dave Silver for 9.1% off your first order. All right, first award, the NJE MVP, the non-Joel Embiid MVP. Who would you give that to for the Sixers this year?
I think you got to give it to Tobias. I think you have to.
Yeah.
I think he's been great. Definitely the hottest he was the first month or two of the season, but it never fully tailed off. They counted on him to hit big shots to stabilize the second unit. He did great. He's just the team is sort of made in his image. He's all vibes at the beginning of the game. He's like, I feel like I want to give him credit for bringing Joel and Ben into the fold of being not just like the 2 best players in the team, but also part of the team, in as far as like the team concept. And they're having fun in pre-games and stuff. I'd give Danny and Dwight credit for that as well. But Tobias has been the dude. He's been every bit, very like a wisp away from 50, 40, 90. Incredibly unexpected.
I give it to him too. The numbers after the All-Star break look similar to the first half. Eye test is not quite the same, but who knows? All right. Most improved player. Who would you give that to?
From year to year, or?
Yeah, you can't give it to Maxey.
Well, I think Tobias is the pretty obvious answer.
Oh, I think it's Embiid.
Yeah, okay. I can make the case for that because he's got. I think Embiid was also very good last year. So from going from like great to elite is a big jump. I guess it probably matters more for the. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe you're right. I was thinking it matters more for the team that Tobias went from like a contract you'll have to throw something onto to get rid of to like borderline all-star, which is a huge deal. But you're right. Embiid being the best player in the league when he's on, I think it's a huge development. It's unbelievable. It's the best.
Most surprising player. Do you want me to do it first?
Yeah.
Or no.
I don't think I was surprised by. I mean, Tobias again.
Tobias sweeping the awards.
Yeah, just everything, all of it.
I give it to Dwight. I just like.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. I
just thought everyone's gonna hate him, and they didn't. They like him. They all like him. So I'm gonna give it to Dwight.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and throw a little nugget to our boy Furkan Korkmaz because he's made himself into an NBA player, and he's obviously going to get $12 million a year from someone.
He's not.
But as far as like defending and using his length to poke the ball out and be a consistent shooter and still, against all odds, attempt that floater and the pump fake being one of the biggest weapons in the league, he's just he's a good player. And he is one of the few players in the team who, in the rotation at least, who chucks and needs to, because he shoots the ball high, he's tall, and he can get it off against anybody. And when he's hot, he's electric. It's the best. It's a really easy team to root for. And after last year, what a breath of fresh air that is.
Most disappointing player. It's gonna be tough for you right now.
I don't think anyone. I think you could say some people might say Shake, but I think that he was the sixth man, and sixth man have like ups and downs, and he ended up totally fine for his role. Was he elite? No, but as far as like on his contract, what they needed from him, I think that he was very good. Disappointing. I mean, Mike Scott going through a stretch of like not even really like looking at the basket from three was tough, and it would have been nice for then. I don't really have one. I think I guess you could also say that maybe Ben not being consistent on the offensive end, having stretches where he looked like, holy shit, he's taking the leap, and then sort of settling in as like, yeah, he gets guys involved in transition and makes other guys' jobs easier, but still doesn't do a ton of creating for himself, and has not added much of a jump shot to his game, although the last couple weeks it seems like he's more willing to take little fadeaways. I could hear that, but I think they're the 1 seed, and that's a huge turnaround from last year. So the fact that nobody really disappointed is kind of baked in.
I would give it to Shake. I don't think he was altogether bad. I just expected more. Yeah. Okay. So I don't think he was bad, but based on what my expectation is, which is what I think disappointing was, that was mine. The best transaction. That includes all draft picks, trades, signings, etc.
And are we counting Doc or Daryl or no?
No. Count only players.
They were all really good. Like nothing was brilliant. Like legitimately nothing was brilliant. That's I think the simplest thing, because Daryl came in with a reputation of being, he takes these big swings. What are you saying? It's not
like you're voting on the Oscars.
No, but I'm being honest. I don't think that there's one that was more vital than the other. I think trading a first round pick with Horford for Danny was not a straight up home run but that's what you had to do. Danny's an expiring contract, and to attach a first-round pick to a guy that they just signed the year before, sucks. But he was certainly very, very helpful, and way more helpful than Horford was with the starters last year. I think Josh for Seth was a total make sense type of trade. The draft picks were all he didn't move around. He just made the selections, and they were all very good value for where they are. I think there's 3 NBA players there, 1 starter, I believe. And the George Hill trade was that's a lot of second round picks to get for George Hill, but I think he's very, very helpful to the team. So I think it's just simplicity, doing the obvious stuff. It's not. I really don't value any one of those over the other ones. They're all absolute, just base hits the opposite way.
I think getting rid of Horford and getting Danny Green for Horford
Sure.
is the best one.
The argument to be made for that is that it makes Joel the happiest. So I think maybe that is maybe that was the way to do it.
Yep. Worst moment, I think we could all say, is the Embiid. If we're just talking about a moment where it seemed like he might be done for the year.
Yeah, that was tough.
Do you have one moment that sticks out as the best one?
I love the Tobias shot against the Lakers.
Yeah,
when the rest of the guys were shoving him and stuff. Any time when, because Embiid was just dominant the whole season, and it was just beautiful to watch, and the starters just steamrolled guys. But the best part of the season is how engaged. I'm gonna be vibes guy, but how engaged the bench was when the starters are when they were on the bench. And when Dwight was doing stuff and everybody got pumped up on the bench, and B-ball Paul doing stuff, and Embiid rolling on the ground, on it might be the B-ball Paul Euro step dunk.
That is a great. I was gonna say that one. I thought you were gonna laugh.
It's a pretty solid one, but Maxi's had a number of beautiful dunks and plays and stuff. I thought Shake actually had a really gorgeous little spin move, lefty floater at the beginning of tonight's game. It was just a really good season, and it was a very, very normal season. This is one of the best teams in the league, and they just took care of business. It was
a normal season.
It was a normal season.
Everyone's wearing masks. There's no one in the crowd.
Yes, for a deeply abnormal season, it was a really shockingly normal season for just a good team that has veterans, has guys that know what they're doing, and had a bunch of young guys that were fun to watch at the end of the bench. It's great. And I don't know after today, because the Lakers are still playing, but as of yesterday, they had overtaken the Lakers to have the best defensive rating in the league.
Yeah,
and they played it.
0.2. Yeah,
they having three of the top 10 defensive players in the league in Ben, Joel, and Matisse. They should be the best defense in the league, and Danny's obviously also very good, and George Hill as well. So, I'm excited to see how that ratchets up in the playoffs, because I do think they had the best defensive team in the league without going all out all the time, and so to see how much better it could get is pretty exciting. It's just it should be this year. This should be the year. It should be the year. We can't assume it's going to keep happening, or everybody's going to stay healthy, or it's going to be better in the future, or whatever. Or next year Brooklyn's going to have even more time together. Whatever it is, there's new teams coming up all the time. They should win the championship this year. They should. It should happen.
I think they're one step away. Is my guess. It wouldn't shock me, but this seems like the step before the step, but who knows? As Sam said, progress is not always linear, so we'll see. You want to get to Jake?
A couple things I want to say before we get to Jake. Just a couple updates on my end. The WNBA season started, and it's great so far. A lot of fun basketball to be played. 25th season, which is a big deal. The NBA's 25th season was in 1973, when they were people were just doing coke on the sidelines and stuff, and it was crazy. So it's very cool for them that they are playing in a league as good as it is. I want there to be a Philadelphia WNBA team, and so it's frustrating that there's not, because there's only 12 teams, which is insane. So the talent level is so many good players do not make the league and have to get cut because there's just not enough space for it. So I hope they expand. So my allegiance is up for sale if anyone wants to pitch me on it. I'm somewhere between Chicago and Connecticut. I really like DeWanna Bonner and Jonquel Jones, and the Phoenix Mercury, because Taurasi and Sky Diggins. And also some updates on my end. You had a good job update yourself last podcast. I have to say, I have to shout out my...
I don't think we even said it, to be quite honest.
We didn't? No. Or you say it. You say yours first.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Spike is taking the job as king of New York. He's the mayor.
Yeah.
He beat Andrew Yang in his weird Bitcoin platform.
Yeah. Does Andrew Yang have a Bitcoin platform?
Probably.
Yeah.
Fuck, whatever.
Right, go ahead.
And Alyssa of my apartment fame got staffed on a new HBO Max show that Mindy Kaling is producing. That's an animated spinoff of Scooby-Doo for like an adult animated spinoff about Velma in high school. So it's very exciting. And that'll be out in a year or two, so we'll bug you about that. But it's very cool, very exciting. For long road for Alyssa to get this, and so I'm just very proud of her. And I was also on her podcast talking about the Real Housewives of New York table flipping, and I talked about why the Housewives is as much of a cinematic universe as Marvel, and I stand true to that. I believe that. So just little updates for the ladies because you can't forget about them. I believe at one point you called me Woman Guy. So I will retain that title.
Congratulations to Alyssa.
Thank you.
That is good. That is good.
That's cool.
It's everyone's favorite time, their favorite award, the By Nature Pet Food Soft Shit Award, given out by one Mike Levin. At the end, though, I got to talk about the food first.
Okay.
And then I was going to give Rebel the Soft Shit Award as he ate something off the fucking ground, and for the last full day... By nature can stop a lot of soft shit, but not when you eat something off the ground that you're not supposed to. So,
sure.
Yeah. But in general, by nature will stop the soft shit because it is going to give your dog or cat healthy bowels. Why? Because it's healthy food. It's good food. If you're eating right, then your number 2 looks right. It's the same thing with pets. How is it better? Better ingredients. The best ingredients, not the normal sort of ingredients that you hear in pet food. You don't hear about apple cider vinegar in pet food. You don't hear about spinach or blueberries or ginger or coconut oil. Premium proteins. All this stuff, all these super ingredients, these super proteins, the super probiotics, super fusion is what they call it. And then they cook it the right way. Don't be giving your dog or cat shitty food. It's not worth it. You're saving like 15%. What are you saving? Make your pet healthy. They slow cook the pet food so it stays more nutrient rich, so your pet can absorb more of those nutrients and be healthier. The company that owns By Nature, been around for 40 years. No recalls. If you deal in pet food, like I do, I'm a pet food dealer, you hear about recalls all the time, not with the company that owns By Nature. No matter what age your dog or cat is, no matter what, if it's indoor cat, outdoor cat, whatever, no matter what size, By Nature has you covered. It's healthy, so it's good for all of them. Won the Pet Business Magazine Award for top dog and cat food line in 2019. All right, here's the deal. 20% off your first order just to try it. Give it a try. I promise your pet will like it. 20% off your first order with promo code 20RTRS at 2 separate places, Chewy and Amazon. So you go to Chewy, you get Amazon, you put By Nature in the cart, use promo code 20RTRS, you get 20% off. Mike, the Soft Shit Award goes to...
And it pains me to do this.
Oh, no.
Because we know that we're big fans and we only wish the best. But I'm going to have to give it to the Boston Celtics franchise organization.
Oh, no. No.
Because for years you've had the bit, which has gotten stale and then refreshed again because it came back around and then stale again so many times. But it's been long enough that the Brad Stevens on the hot seat bit has basically become true. And I have to give them the Soft Shit Award for making your bits valid. I will say, my good friend of mine, Trevor, is a Celtics fan, and he wants the Celtics to lose by 100 in the play-in so that they can get embarrassed and show Danny Ainge just how much work he has ahead of him and, quote, turn the heat up on Brad.
Oh, man. Really,
it's going bad.
Hot seat. Yeah, real hot seat.
Yeah.
Oh,
now they
that's
could. I'm very excited about the plan. So there's a chance that they, lose to the Wizards, which would be very fun, and the Wizards and Nets would be a first round series, which would be great. But then beat either Indiana or Charlotte, and then it would be Boston, Philly in the 1-8, which would be very nice, and I would like that.
Yeah.
I would like that very much.
Wow, I can't believe the hot seat's actually happening.
Yeah, finally.
Man, just really great for me.
Time.
Great for my brand. All right, the Soft Shit Award goes to the Boston Celtics franchise. Your pet is going to get no more soft shit by eating By Nature pet food. Again, promo code 20 RTRS. We are joined by an old friend, a trusted confidant, and a writer of a book. Jake Fischer's book, Built to Lose, came out this week. Congratulations on writing a whole book.
A book.
A whole book.
Thank you very much.
I used to make you do recaps that were, I was asking maybe 350 words back on Liberty Ballers days. And I don't think you were paid for that. And neither was I, barely. So that's a good way to start the interview. I hope you make more money on this book than you make writing for Liberty Ballers. Jake, hello. How's it going?
Doing well, guys. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's I think the most I maxed out at LB was $100 a month for running the Facebook page back in the day. So hopefully we can outrank that. But,
profitable times.
I've been a long time listener, so appreciate you guys having me on, and excited to relitigate as always.
Of course, this is really. We're looking for any chance we can get to relitigate it, and before we get into the book itself, because we do have some questions, a lot of fun new nuggets that I want to ask you about. The Sixers, what I would still call the process Sixers, as they should be known as their full title, just finished number 1 in the Eastern Conference. 8 years to the day that Hinkie was hired was the official clincher 2 days ago.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Which is a pretty big deal. Jake, your feelings about that, and how you feel like that those 8 years coalescing into, at least right now, a first place finish, but hopefully more. How much that is built into the national landscape of the history of the league.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the book's title says, the tanking right changed the league forever. I think the most direct way is, of course, the lottery reform and the play-in tournament that, we're seeing all this seeding happen right now. But in terms of with Philly specifically, as I've been doing this media tour for the book, everyone keeps asking me, did the process work? And the answer I always say is, this goal the entire time was to be a perennial contender, right? Dare always talks about that 5% benchmark to separate teams that have a real chance at claiming that championship versus teams that are just kind of hanging around and doing something. And I think the goal was always to have this type of team that could be there year after year after year. And this is just the start. I mean, Embiid's finally playing like an MVP-type candidate. Ben Simmons has kind of realized his defensive potential as the Swiss Army knife that he can be, guarding 1 through 5, and they finally have a front office leadership in place that can maximize those guys as supplementary players. So it seems like the start of the next chapter, and it feels like an absolute culmination for sure. And I think anyone who disagrees is kind of missing the point of this altogether.
Hinkie's kind of like the Wilt of executives, changing the changing the rules so he couldn't do, you know what I mean? There's not a ton of executives in the history of the league that have had the league basically change the rules so they couldn't succeed that way anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's still happening, right? OKC, as we've texted about, Spike is doing stuff that's more brazen and audacious than anything Hinkie ever did, sending Al Horford home for half the year. The Rockets have John Wall, sitting courtside while Kevin Porter Jr. just takes his role and he's sitting there happy, clapping his hands. But the narrative around that team, which that word is kind of a word that I've come to hate in this basketball media lexicon that we have today, but it's true. I mean, the fact that they were that 15-16 team, their pursuit potentially being the worst team ever, as we can talk about later on with some details that I have, that was stealing headlines from Golden State as they were becoming the best team of all time, 73-9, and the league did not like that. But here we are. The strategy clearly had its dividends, and we're still seeing, all these years later, 2021 is considered to be the best draft class since 2014. And sure enough, all these teams are lining up in the top of the tankathon standing. So I think the strategy was clear, and I think his Hinkie's fingerprints are pretty indelible on this league history.
Do you think, like, because you named Oklahoma City, Houston, a number of other teams have, the Sixers notoriously during the Hinkie's 3-year stretch were only the worst team in the league once, that third year. Do you think that there's some Philadelphia-specific reason why it became such a hot button sensation that polarized things on so many sides of it? Because there have been bad teams before. There are bad teams now. There are bad teams then. But for some reason, I mean, it obviously isn't New York or LA. But do you think had Hinkie done this in X, small market team from 12 to 30 as far as small market, do you think it would have happened as much? Was it something about Philadelphia, or was it something about the Sixers online community that made it louder and worse?
I think a combination of all those factors. I think the fact that Philly, is the number 4 media market in the country definitely, boosted up this storyline. I mean, yeah, the Thunder are not leading SportsCenter like a Philadelphia team is, outside of when they have Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. The other thing, I think, being the Philadelphia market, as Spike knows as well as anybody with the WIP, the role it has in framing the discussion every week. I really do think Sam recognizes it today. His lack of transparency. I mean, he wasn't transparent. He wasn't not transparent. He was very clear what he was going to do. But speaking only on the record at the deadline and at the draft, I think we've talked about it over and over and over again. That it fanned the flames to the fire he was already starting, and I think it made it kind of into this smoke stack that was billowing all across the entire NBA that was impossible to ignore. And he could have done what he could have made concessions. Derek and I were talking about it at my little event I had at Liberty Grounds last week, where he knew he could have made concessions in real time, and he just didn't. And I think that I wrote it in the book. I think that ultimately was his downfall. If he put a face to it. Thad Young even said it to me on the record too, that you have to kind of understand that this is an entertainment business. And part of that entertainment business is spoon feeding your messaging and your strategy to your fan base. And I think that was ultimately his biggest weakness and the reason he's no longer in the league.
Those are two different things, I think. You're saying to the fan base. The fan base, at least the most vocal part of it, was cool with it and was actively defending it. You're saying he needed to spoon feed like the local and national reporters.
I think it was more national than local, to be honest with you. I think if everybody in Philadelphia got mad, I don't think Silver steps in. People are fucking mad in Philadelphia every day, and the commissioner doesn't step in,
And I will say, to Mike's point and Spike's point, as I've done more rumor-type mongering crap for Bleacher Report this year, the way the national guys want to get their information fed and which GMs and which executives are doing that and, helping, feed their scoops, that definitely plays a factor too, absolutely.
Do you think that this is one of those things, the tanking issue, that I wish I could come up with a metaphor for it, that everybody in the league offices and everybody in the teams knows there's nothing they will actually do anything about, and that every fix is just to satiate the public? Or do you think they actually have an interest in changing what goes on?
No, I agree that they're just trying to satiate the public. There was multiple executives I talked to for the book who said when they passed reform in 2017, they were only doing it to kind of puff their chest out and put up their fist in the air and say, we fixed tanking. Daryl even jokingly tweeted at Sam, remember on that day, tanking is solved. That's kind of all you need to know, I think, to assess what it really is on the inside. The fact that it's no longer a number one storyline is all they cared about. They only had an issue when it was leading SportsCenter and leading PTI and all that type of stuff. Now that it's a COVID-riddled season and there aren't owners complaining about lack of fans in the stands because there aren't any anyway, or the fact that it's not in Philadelphia, it's happening in these smaller markets, they don't care at all. They only really care that it was creating this apparent black eye on the public image.
Yeah, that sucks. I do think you said Hinkie, like if Hinkie played ball a little bit more, whether that's spoon feeding a story or like, the famous example that's been talked about in a bunch of places, including your book, is Andy Miller, an agent who represented Kristaps Porzingis before the draft, wouldn't let Sam meet with Porzingis. Wouldn't let him work out. Wouldn't let him even talk to him. Like, kept him away. Lied about food poisoning or something. Like, do you think had Hinkie signed one of Andy Miller's clients, like Jeff Teague or something, to like a mediocre deal, that would have been enough to be like, all right, he's cool. We're fine. Like, do you think that it was like as simple as that, instead of like saving a roster spot for anybody on the shirt that nobody remembers? Had he just given a little bit more money to somebody, Andy Miller's client, it would, he'd still be here, honestly.
I don't know if that would have been that direct, but for sure, agents were absolutely pissed. I mean, they're talking about it right now with OKC having this $55 million in the upcoming salary room, and they're probably not going to use it. I think the Andy Miller specific case was also Nerlens related, right? Like,
yeah.
I have the book starts chapter 1. I bring you right to Nerlens Noel's draft table as John Calipari is losing his mind as Nerlens is falling from 1 to 2 down to 6, and it kind of was. I did that to intentionally mirror how the Kristaps situation happened, because Nerlens did fall all the way down partially because his representation refused to have him work out anywhere besides the top 2 teams. So once he fell out of the equation, Washington's not picking him. They already had their sights set on Otto Porter on number 4 that year. Now I'm starting to draw a blank, but whatever. He wasn't giving. It was Charlotte actually, and they picked Cody Zeller over him. Phoenix picked Alex Len over him because they were scrambling to actually give those teams information. And he did the same thing with Kristaps later on. But I think partially he did that because he didn't want to have another center at Nerlens' position in that whole type of thing. Because, as we have in the book, and as Yaron's book kind of detailed already too, Nerlens had all those interdisciplinary issues as a rookie, and I think Andy was just trying to stray away from that situation. But overall, yeah, agents were not pleased with Sam by any account. That whole 2015 offseason, the players' union was pushing them not to take that non-guaranteed deal. That was like the Hinkie special was a number one topic of the agendas of the agent summit meetings that whole summer. And it turned out Rashawn's deal as a second-round pick was the richest contract Hinkie gave out that entire offseason. So, yeah, agents were definitely pissed, but I don't think it was because of jockeying around with that. I think it was just overall he was staunch in that negotiating style, and he wouldn't back off of it.
Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
To that point, you did in the book. You have a really delightful section in that 2015-16 season, which is Ish's second run, of Sixers players celebrating that the season. I think it was after the trade deadline, right, where they hadn't reached the salary floor because the Joel Anthony trade fell through due to Donatas Motiejunas failing his physical, which is just like which forced the Sixers to cut Jakar, which sucks. But like that selection, first of all, that sequence of names just on its own is just a delightful 5 years ago type of time. And Carl Landry being the guy to be like, we're going to the salary floor, we fucking did it. We're getting to split this. How much money was it that they were splitting? It
was like $3 million, something
$3 million,
like that.
Whatever, 11 or 12 different ways.
Yeah.
And then sadly Sonny Weems being the guy to the Sixers claim him on waivers, and then everybody being mean to Sonny Weems because it means that they don't get to split a couple $100,000 each. I thought that was delightful and was a really fun human way, in a different way than is think about the players and their development and the coach, but like a straight up, hey, we were gonna get this money. We were going to get this money, and then Hinkie signing some fucking Sonny Weems guy who's never even in the NBA after this, cost us money, and now we'd be on a 10-win team for nothing. I just thought that was a great section.
Well, I was just going to say that $200,000 just for somebody making $30 million is nothing, but for a lot of these guys,
sure,
big. That's 20% of their salary for the year for a lot of them.
TJ was making $860K that year, so he would have added a fifth of his bonus just like that, But it was hilarious. That was one of my favorite anecdotes in the entire book, especially because Carl Landry was the one leading these chants They're like on the bench during the game. Like, do we want Carl Landry? Hell no. Do we want Carl Landry? Hell no. And they just
Joel Anthony.
Sorry, Carl Landry was leading. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
Carl Landry goes up to Joel Anthony post game, like gives him a hug, and is like, "Hey man, we're just messing with you."
Yeah.
It was so fun. I mean, the friendships I think that came from that back of the bench during that season. I mean, TJ and Nick Stauskas are best friends. Jeremy Grant, Jakar, those guys have like a bond that I think is unbreakable because of everything we've talked about. They were just in the eye of the hurricane while ESPN and everyone's complaining about what's happening with them. These guys are just trying to make the league. They're 22-year-old kids like making a couple $100,000 trying to satisfy a dream, and they were in the middle of everything. I think it's pretty fascinating, that whole complex of all that. All the factors combined is pretty wild.
Yeah, and the nugget that Elton Brand was the one who's obviously signed on the team at that point to basically be like a player, coach, babysitter type, being like, guys, they're not going to give us that money. Like, we've won 10 games this season. They're not going to pay us more money to do it. And everyone be like, what do you mean? But it's been hard for us. We had a tough time. It's been a tough season. And then being still like him being like, Elton already transitioning to management, being like, that doesn't make fiscal sense. I went to Duke. Trust me here. I thought that was really funny. And to your point, I think we talk about this a lot. There's a lot of straw men in the anti-process argument about what about those players who didn't succeed, as if they're the process players, the only ones who didn't succeed. And what about the players who didn't get a chance to play structured basketball? It's like, well, they probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to play in the NBA otherwise. And Cove and Jakar and TJ and a number of other guys and Christian Wood, who we can talk about, have made careers because they got their first shot playing real minutes on the process and got better. And I think two-way contracts, which came about in 2018 or so, 17,
I think
18?
so. I think the 18-19 year, yeah.
I would guess part of the reason for two-way contracts is so that those young guys have a chance of playing but not taking veteran, regular salary type jobs. And I think the process is part of that, of hey, we need more, we want young guys, but it's okay, you can get young guys, but for half the price, and you still got to give veteran stuff. And I think all of it matters. I just don't think the process was bad for players in any sense of it. I just really don't.
Yeah, I don't think Hinkie gets enough credit for giving all those guys auditions. I mean, even guys like Tim Frazier, he's still kicking around in the league, signing some random rest of the season deal, partially because of what he did in that 10-day contract that got it all started. He was the D-League MVP. Every single team had a chance to sign him. Then he comes in that one start against Boston. I had this scene in the book where he was trying to go back to the D-League locker room because he got his call up to Philly from Springfield, from Portland, Maine, and the facility was locked because all the staffers had already gone to Boston to give him to cheer him on in his start, and he wears Avery Bradley's shoes that Bradley wore to the arena that game, and he still has 10 assists coming off the bench after replacing Point Jakar. So Sam doesn't get enough credit for giving those guys a chance, for sure.
Yeah,
I do think the issue of players, and I'm sure, Jake, you spoke to enough of them, and some of the anecdotes speak to it, is that I obviously think it's great that it gave chances to those players, but I think it would be I think I don't think the issue is as simple as it's fine because it gives young players a chance. There are plenty of veteran players who are stuck in the middle of that who lose years, and Horford for one, or Kevin Love, or whoever it is, and the problem becomes we all just go, well, they're making $30 million is fine. But I don't always think, not that I think that there's a solution to this, but I don't think because somebody makes $30 million that they should just be okay with shitting away years of their career. I think that's one of the issues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that that's the case either, but there's always going to be bad teams. There's always going to be teams that just aren't as good. You're never going to have here's 30 teams that are all within 5 games of 500. There's going to be great teams, and there's going to be teams, even whether they're trying to lose or not, whether they're the Kings and the Wolves for years sucking and by accident, or the Lakers prior to getting LeBron. There's always going to be bad teams. And so for the fan base, you may as well be bad on purpose so you can do something. And for the players, it's do the thing that Spike you don't like or at least for JJ, he didn't like it, which is like ask for a trade and like have your reps do the negotiation of being like, hey, I don't want to be on this team.
But it's not always that easy. It's not. I don't have a problem with asking for a trade, but like if you're in the third year of a 5-year deal of $150 million, you can't always get a trade.
Yeah,
sure.
You know?
Look at Thad Young. Like Thad, that 2013-14 season, he desperately wanted out of Philly. That classic Disney on Ice road trip. I mean, this is a funny. I'm like, I remember being in my 2008 Honda CRV, calling you, getting the scoop that Thad requested a trade, and like not knowing whether or not to write about it for LB. And of course, like he denies it publicly, and it's this whole thing that like people like in the radio, whatever, calling out the legitimacy of the report, and then like sure enough, sit down with Thad at some hotel in New York 8 years later. He's like, oh yeah, I want to get the hell out of there. And he goes on that Disney on Ice road trip and like puts up 30 a game, and like Jason Richardson is like telling him on the plane like, yeah man, like you definitely want to get out of here. And like sure enough, he can't because Sam is holding his value. He would refuse to give him up for less than a first round pick. Sure enough, they did get that in that 3-team deal with Kevin Love. But there's a scene that I have in the book very quickly where after the deadline, Indiana comes back, Evan Turner and Lavoy Allen find Thad at half court, and they're like, we're sorry you're still here. And Thad definitely felt like he wasted a year of his career, absolutely. So I do see the point of what you're saying, Spike.
I guess my point is that happens all the time. Thad's on a Chicago team that sucks right now.
For sure.
There's plenty of teams players on teams that are bad, that just because they're not bad on purpose, because they're bad by accident, it doesn't mean they don't feel like they're also wasting a year of their career. I get that. That's my perspective. Is like,
yeah, but if somebody hurt you physically, there is a difference. Like hit you in the head, you're bleeding, you have a concussion. There is a difference between whether they attempted to do that or whether they slipped and hit you in the head. And I think trying to, again, I don't have it's just sort of like it comes with the territory, I guess, in a certain respect, but there is a difference between trying and not trying, I think.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, my argument is always like the coaches and players on the team are trying almost always. I think that there wasn't a time when Brett was like, you guys should lose, or telling TJ or Isaiah Cannon like, hey, miss this shot. And so if you're on a bad team, maybe we can ask Thad that. Like maybe that's a question you can ask for Thad. Like, hey, you've been on shitty teams. Like, does it feel basically the same, or because it was like a national narrative, did you feel like kind of a scapegoat on this thing? Maybe it was just like more popular. Anyway, it's an interesting discussion, but I think ultimately I come on the side of there's as much good and bad as any situation, and the process got scapegoated for a bunch of reasons that people against it already were just pulling out of their hat to be against it more.
Well, one thing I think runs through this entire story is that everyone in the NBA has their own agenda, right? Every agent wants their player to be in a position to get paid the most. Every coach wants to put himself in a position to be successful, to get his next great job that he wants, or whatever. Every GM is exacting his plan to definitely maximize his team and his overall organization. But these guys know that it comes down to their record, and it comes down to when the trade happens, that when Kevin Pelton puts up his grades, or people react on Twitter, it's Sam Presti versus Daryl Morey. It's not the whole front office versus the whole front office. So those guys everyone's got their own opinion and agenda and things that put themselves in the whole NBA ecosystem further along. So yeah, like someone's going to get burned pretty much any rotation change, any transaction, whatever. That is just part of the business. It does suck for a lot of people, but you do. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I see both sides of it.
Yeah, there was a good nugget that I had forgotten at the 2016 draft lottery that Dikembe Mutombo had tweeted congrats to the Sixers hours before they won the lottery. I had totally forgotten that. And in reading it in your book, it is a conspiracy that I buy, that they told him that it was going to be the Sixers, that they were allowing the Sixers to win the lottery so that them forcing the Colangelos onto us was here, take these guys, and we'll give you the number one pick because of it. And I'm not a conspiracy-minded guy, but that's enough. That's enough to clear the threshold for me. What do you think?
I don't think it was a conspiracy. Okay. I will say Dikembe Mutombo was probably the first official interview I did for this book. When I was still at Sports Illustrated. A lot of times we get these random PR events in the city, like, hey, come to this food hall called the Penzi in Madison Square Garden and come talk to Dikembe Mutombo for 5 minutes. And I was like, what can I possibly talk to Dikembe Mutombo about? 2016 lottery thing. He was legitimately freaked out that he was going to lose his job being an NBA ambassador. And he deleted his Twitter account and told his son, God. You have my password now. I can't log in there without making this mistake anymore. And Adam Silver calls him into his office and says you can't represent the league this way. He was actually distraught, losing sleep over this little tweet gaffe that he had, which I thought was hilarious.
I'm trying to imagine Adam Silver telling his 7-foot Dikembe Mutombo, one of the best defensive players of all time, just scolding him and being you're a bad job, Dikembe.
Yeah.
Really, really funny. And the fact that me and Dikembe Mutombo did the same thing, because in 2010 I got fooled running for the SB Nation's Philly site. I got fooled by a fake Zach Greinke trade to the Phillies, which wasn't real. And I still have flop sweat dreams about. I feel a kinship with Dikembe, and now always will because of him.
If somebody wrote this book again in 20 years, what do you think it would be like? Where do you think it goes from here?
Yeah. Well, I guess I should give my actual pitch for it, because we've kind of just jumped right into this. I say the book is anecdotal history of a bunch of different case studies of tanking that was happening around the same time, because as all these analytical executives were coming to power on the league, it wasn't just Sam. As much as Sam and Philly, they're by far the main character of this thing. Mm-hmm. It was Rob Hennigan in Orlando too. People forget Phoenix was supposed to be worse than Philly that 13-14 season. Yep. KG and Paul Pierce were traded to Brooklyn the same exact night that Hinkie traded Drew Holiday to New Orleans. So
that was the same night?
Same exact night. Andrew Sharp, I met him for the first time at the draft in 2013. It was his first day starting for Grantland. I remember he wrote this column the night the NBA draft got drunk, because there was 8 trades, and it was the record for international guys drafted in the first round. It was madness, and it was because Hinkie traded Drew that no one knew. As it's in the book too. Very few people in Philly, in the entire organization, even knew that trade was happening too. Mm-hmm. And the Brooklyn Nets thing happened right bang bang in the first round. So, I mean, it was all happening coincidentally, that for that 2014 class coming up, because Miami was running the league, right, with these 3 guys from the top 5 in 2003. 14 was considered to be the best class since then. So all these executives thought, instead of competing against Miami, we'll just get the next generation of those guys, and by the time that dynasty crumbles, we'll be there. And that has worked, for a lot of those teams. Philly, obviously, number 1 seed like we've talked about. Boston's not there really anymore, but they did make the conference finals, a bunch. And they kind of, that's a whole nother podcast about how they have, not really handled that situation well the last couple of years. And then Phoenix didn't think it'd be Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, but, the draft, you draft all-stars to attract all-stars. Chris Paul's there. They're a top seed in the West. So flashing forward to get back to Spike's question, this 2021 class is considered to be the next best class since 14, like I said, at the top 2. So if Cade Cunningham, goes to OKC, and then, they have Shea already. If Houston has Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood, and they get this guy, if this next generation of the tanking era produces this next generation of young plucky contenders, I think also the tanking thing is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of super team building, right? The Rockets had a superstar in James Harden. He just said, I want to go to Brooklyn, and now they're immediately the worst team in the league. So I think the story, the way it's going right now, I think it's going to end up being how there's this vicious carousel in the NBA where you tank to get your guy, and once you get that guy, it's everything you can do to build a team around him before it's too late. And if it is too late, you have to trade him and tank all over again. So I think that's my guess as to where this is going if something doesn't change.
Yeah, that's the thing for me is I think too often people on the other side think that we deify the process as if it was some brilliant thing. I really don't think it was brilliant. I think it was pretty obvious and deeply necessary based on, if you look at the Sixers rosters from 2006 to 2012, that there was just no other choice than to do that. Otherwise, there was such a ceiling, and the ceiling was very low. The ceiling was a 6 seed. And in my mind, it's what OKC is doing is not that brilliant or complicated. It is just prioritizing something the furthest down the road than any other team is doing. And so I think it's necessary. I think it is brave if you have owners that like stick to their guns and have like the gumption to do it and all that stuff.
Which might be the most important factor.
Which is the most important factor. But I don't think it's it's not hard to be like, hey, you want this guy? Like, yeah, we'll take a second round pick or a high second round pick to like take your salary. We don't need it anyway. Like, that's not that hard to do. Like, drafting is hard, but acquiring draft picks when you don't care about winning in the short term is not, and never was. And it was just, the process only took 3 years. It would have taken 2 years if Embiid was held. It didn't get hurt a second time. Obviously Simmons also misses first year. Nerlens misses first year. Like, these guys had been available because of injury, and the Sixers prioritized that. But like, they had the best talent, and it would have been even shorter for what. Anyway, we know this. Who are we talking to? We're
well,
talking to
I just want to say to your point about having the gumption to do it. Like, that's why Sacramento is so included in the book, because they never had a chance to really get a changing guy. Like, they got DeMarcus at 5, who by all accounts had all the talent to do it. But Vivek and Mike Malone and Pete D'Alessandro came into Sacramento right when Sam and Brett came into Philly. And the Kings had 3 different head coaches in those first 2 years, and they bring in Vlade to replace Pete D'Alessandro, and there's all this infighting. I mean, I have this crazy scene in the book after the trade deadline in 2016. Vance Wahlberg, who was an assistant in the early Brett Brown days, Vlade Divac calls him into his office and just fires him because Vivek wanted to give a message to George Karl to say who's in control of the franchise. Like, you're never going to rebound back into postseason contention if you don't have a direct uniform formula and a plan, which I know is what you guys were begging for a decade, and what I was too back when I was a fan of the team. Like, to actually have some concerted strategy, like, very few. It's pretty funny how few franchises actually have that strategy concocted and then exact it for multiple years over. We see too many changing of the guards and too many changes of direction where you just end up chasing your own tail and you get stuck in the mud.
Back when I was a fan of the team. You're still a fan of the team, Jake. Come on. This is journalistic integrity. Kevin O'Connor, Zach Lowe, fan of the team. You're still a fan of the team. Used to write for Liberty Ballers. Used to write MCW Tank Diaries. Even though I was like, Jake, you're a journalist. You're not funny. You're still doing it, and I respect you for doing it. But you're still a Sixers fan. Not a chance do you not root for the Sixers in the playoffs this year.
My brother always busts my balls about saying that, but it's true. I mean, the story I give to like most clearly define it for the book, I came down to Sixers Warriors last January, like right after Kobe died, because I needed to talk to D'Angelo. And I went to Warriors practice on that Tuesday night at Drexel and like waited for like 2 hours to find out D'Angelo didn't want to talk. Pre-game, he doesn't want to talk. Like, I need to talk to him post-game. I already took a bus down from New York. Like, I'm sitting in the Wells Fargo Center rooting for Golden State to win, so D'Angelo will be in a good mood to talk to me. Like, that's just kind of how this goes,
one
man.
Game. Maybe I'll give you the one game you're rooting for D'Angelo. Selfishly rooting for D'Angelo to win.
Listen, if they win, it'll be great for the book. So I'm not mad that the Sixers have the most direct path to the conference finals in the Eastern Conference right now.
That's fair.
Jake roots for Jake #1 and the Sixers #2, right?
Listen, call me selfish, but that is exactly what I root for, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great book, and there's a bunch of snippets of it that I really love, and some new nuggets that I had not known about. TJ asking his teammates if they think all season that he's going to make the team. I thought it was great. Reliving Hawes admitting that he wasn't trying in that last Cavs game.
The worst game ever played by any NBA player.
Which is great. Yeah. There being a real, not even possibility, but probability that Danny Ferry was going to be hired prior to, as co-GM with Hinkie, prior to Sean Marks getting the Brooklyn job, and then Brian Colangelo being like, well, I want this one then. And Hinkie probably being, I guess, more fine with sharing duties with Danny Ferry, which would have been interesting.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's some good Christian Wood stuff with Hinkie. Christian Wood claiming that he's one of Hinkie's guys, which I think is great.
Christian Wood was one of the funnier interviews for the entire book, because I walked up to him. I remember it was I think he was in the Bucks at the time, shoot around at the Garden, and he I did a thing with him for SI back when he first signed with Philly to kind of go through his fall from grace on draft night, and he's crying in his lap, realizing I'm going undrafted, to where he it was a humbling experience for him.
Sure.
But he's still kind of a loose cannon with quotes, which is like a reporter's dream. And I told him like, hey man, I'm gonna ask you about the fight in Boston. He was like, no, I can't talk about that. I was like, don't worry. In like 15 minutes, I'm going to ask you about the fight about Boston. And sure enough, like as we get to there in the conversation, I was like, so you want to talk about the fight in Boston? He was like, yeah, fuck it. Let's do it. So Christian Wood, I have a soft spot for him. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's good, man. Well, it's a great book, and it gives a big picture and microscopic view of the process and other tanking jobs during this year. We recommend everybody get the book if you're a fan. Built to Lose: How the NBA's Tanking Era Changed the League Forever, from a formerly $100 a week to operate the Facebook at Liberty Ballers, writer Jake Fischer. I'm proud of you.
There's not an audiobook, is there? You should get Mike to read the audiobook.
There is an audiobook, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
If I had an audiobook, I'd be making a lot of commentary. It would be a long audiobook. It would be like, hang on a second, and brief interlude between this chapter.
Yeah, well, this is wrong. Yeah.
There's some guy named Kevin who apparently knows the SID of Northeastern basketball when I was there covering the team for the radio station. So I don't know his last name, but apparently he did a good job. I've actually been meaning to buy it to give it a listen, but I have no review yet. And I have a camp friend who bought the audiobook CD, quote unquote, which I don't even know what that means. And apparently it's backed up and he hasn't ordered it. And he like did it as a bit to be like, I didn't get the book, I bought the CD. So his troll has been trolled right back at him.
Well, congratulations on the book. Writing, as I said, a whole book. You wrote a whole book. Yeah,
I appreciate that. Thank
you
guys.
Good stuff, man.
All right, we will talk to you. I don't know, later this week, Wednesday-ish, something like that.
Midway through the
play-in
tournament, so we'll have a better idea of who it's going to be. Jake, do you want to say it?
Do you want to say the thing at the end? This is a proof if Jake listens.
Yeah, you know Lickface?
Yeah.
We have to wait till Spike says the thing. Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's too late. He'd already said it.
All right. Thanks, Jake.
If you don't fuck with me, then I won't fuck with you.
If you don't fuck with me,
Then I won't fuck with you.
but if you fuck with me,
I'm gonna fucking kill you!
That's a plan.